Hi, my name is George Chanos. I formerly served as Nevada's Attorney General. According to the Washington Post, over 187,000 students at 193 schools have experienced a school shooting since the Columbine massacre. Since 1999, there have been 10 school shootings each year, on average, in the U.S., and shootings have occurred across 36 states. The shootings have caused 375 deaths or injuries. On May 18, 2018, 10 more people were killed, and another 13 were injured by a 17-year-old wielding his father's shotgun and a .38 caliber. Santa Fe, Texas, Palmdale, California, Ocala, Florida, Lexington Park, Maryland, Parkland, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee, all high school shootings, all happening this year, all teenage shooters. Why? I'm joined by two high school students who are here to help us understand and explore these issues. Kaitlyn Willoughby is a senior. She was the lead student facilitator for the Las Vegas March for Our Lives event held here in Las Vegas. She is active in speech and debate, attending nationals last year. Also with me is Mateo Tomas Portelli, a sophomore. Mateo is the 2018 Nevada State Congressional Debate Champion, as well as a member of the 2018 Nevada State Mock Trial Championship team. Ultimately, for you to have impact, you have to be able to express your views to people that are in a position to do something about it. Fortunately, we have someone here today, a special guest, who is such a person. He currently serves as the chairman of the County Commission for Clark County and is a candidate for governor of the state of Nevada. Join me in welcoming Steve Sisolak.
Hello, George. How are you?
Hi, Steve. How are you?
It's always a pleasure.
Great to see you.
Nice to
Mateo
meet you.
and Kaitlyn.
Kaitlyn, real pleasure to meet you. How do you do?
So, Kaitlyn and Mateo, this is a unique opportunity for all of us. It's an opportunity for you to ask Commissioner Sisolak whatever questions you might have concerning the issues that we're facing in our schools. And it's also an opportunity for him to ask you some questions about what your thoughts are on this important issue. So, Kaitlyn, let's begin with you. Is there anything that you would like to ask Commissioner Sisolak?
I guess my first question would be, what are you currently doing or what are you planning to do if you were elected governor to affect gun laws in our country?
Well, I appreciate it. First off, Kaitlyn, I want to thank you for what you're doing, raising awareness, which is extremely important in our country right now, in our state. There's several things that I'd like to implement, and after 1 October, my life changed because I was intimately involved with 1 October and visited the actual site on the 2nd of October and saw the bodies and the blood and the devastation that occurred. And after that time, I've come to the conclusion, I feel very, very strongly. First it started with Sandy Hook, and then it kind of concluded there that there's no need for bump stocks or assault rifles, which are, to me, are weapons of war, expanded cartridges, that sort of thing. And I think that we need to immediately implement background checks for those individuals who wish to purchase a gun. That would be the first step forward.
Okay, great.
Mateo, is there something that you'd like to ask Commissioner Sisolak?
Commissioner, I'm curious as to the previous and hopefully future attempts within the Clark County and the state of Nevada to attempt to mitigate any wanting mental health crises affecting the youth of our state.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mateo, and I appreciate that. This is more than just a gun problem. A gun problem is part of it, but there's clearly mental health issues in all of these cases. These are all people that are very, very angry individuals, bitter individuals for one reason or another. I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of exactly what's been at the root of these, but what happened from Mandalay Bay and what happened in Parkland, what happened in Santa Fe, it does not come from people that have a logical, clean mind. And we've got to do something to get to the root of what really is the cause here. And I think we need to employ more experts, we need to invest more money in mental health, and we need to take this issue more seriously than it's being taken.
So let's start with that issue. There was an interesting article in the New York Times today. The New York Times came out with the position that the problem here is simply too many guns. There are roughly 300 million guns in the United States. That's a lot of guns. Probably is too many guns. But is that, in fact, the only issue? Or is this a multidimensional issue that includes guns, but also includes issues like mental illness or teenage suicide? What are your thoughts on that issue? One of the things that I find is that when we talk about this issue and we're trying to make progress with different groups, one group might think this is all about guns, as evidenced by the New York Times. Another group might think, no, this has nothing to do with guns. This is all about mental illness. Is it one or the other, or is it a combination of both? Mateo?
Well, before coming here today, I work with the Clark County Law Foundation's Trial by Peers program. I'm a youth attorney here in Las Vegas, and I was prosecuting some cases of delinquents acting in contrary to the law. We had a few cases of drug paraphernalia and drug possession, and I was prosecuting. But in my history of working with that program, we never blame, the smoking pipe for the child's actions. We never blame the marijuana itself for the crime. At the root of the issue, it's a human element. And obviously, no one's saying that it's not the fault of the smoking pipe being present. But I would agree with you, Mr. Chanos, that it's not just the item, it's not just the tool, and it's not just the person. This is multifaceted.
Kaitlyn, what are your thoughts?
I do agree that it is a multifaceted problem. It's definitely not one or the other. I do agree with Mateo in the sense that it is a huge mental health problem that needs to we don't need to just address that the mental health problem is there, but we actually need to start solving the mental health problem, which I believe a lot of elected officials have not done at the status quo. But then beyond that, we do have too many guns in our country, and they're not regulated or enforced on many levels. So we have gun laws, but they're not enforced. So all of these are multiple problems in our country that need to be solved in order to stop these shootings and the devastation that is happening at the status quo.
Commissioner, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are those are extremely mature answers from folks that are so young and have such a grasp of the issue, and I appreciate that. I think it is multifaceted, clearly. I mean, the guns are an issue. I mean, as George had said, Mr. Chanos had said, there's too many guns. People are getting guns that shouldn't have guns, and this is the issue we have with school shootings, but we have other issues with domestic violence and so forth that are gun-related that also need to be addressed. But mental health is a big, big issue, and we need to do more. We don't have enough beds currently. I'd say a third of the people that are in the Clark County Detention Center are really mental health patients. They're not criminals, but that's where we end up housing them, storing them. But more needs to be done. We're at an issue right now, in my opinion, that a lot of it is in the heart. There's a lot of hatred in this country that we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to have people stop talking about each other and start talking more to each other and with each other in order to get the real root of what this problem is.
Absolutely. So let's talk about mental health for a minute. 1 out of 4 people your age have indicated that they have seriously contemplated suicide. Suicide rates have doubled among people your age in the last decade. Why? What's going on? Kaitlyn.
Me personally, I believe that it's a multifaceted problem as well. First, it's the fact that mental health is a growing problem in our country, but it's not being addressed. It's not taken seriously at all, and it wasn't in the past, but now there's a lot more issues such as cell phones and social media and more access to lethal things that could cause these people to die. All of these together and the inability to address it and the unconsciousness to address it all causes these problems where now they have the mental health problems that aren't addressed, then in the future, they're not only not being addressed, but now they have more access to these weapons.
Mateo?
I would say that it wasn't until after Columbine that our country really started to look at the mental health of our youth. If you look at the journals of the actors of Columbine, you'll see that they had a deep internal hatred for the world. They hated being and they hated humanity itself. So their solution was to try to take out as many of their peers as possible. So that's clearly evident of the fact that there was something wrong with them in the mind. And unfortunately, I would say that chalking up kids who may seem depressed or who may seem sad as just being sad or just being stressed doesn't solve the issue. Ignoring our peers who may be crying out for help on social media and ignoring the bullying that may occur or spreading these rumors, that doesn't fix the solution.
So, Steve, before I have you opine on this, I want to dig a little deeper on what's going on in your schools on this issue. What are you seeing? What kind of bullying has been raised as an issue that's creating mental health issues? The Santa Fe shooter, it's been reported that his sister was bullied and was forced to leave that school and move to another school. I don't know whether or not that contributed. I don't know if there was a revenge motivation, but bullying is something that's going on in our high schools. It's something that's creating discomfort, mental discomfort among those who are being bullied. Some of those people may be the people that are acting out hostilely. What are you seeing in the schools in terms of bullying?
I'll say that, at least in my school, I don't see a whole lot of physical picking on. You know, I don't see kids being pushed into lockers. I don't see not so much verbal harassment. But I will say that there's certainly a lot of gossip. And I think that bullying has evolved over the years, especially with the introduction of more Facebook and more Instagram, more social media in general, that allows students to, in effect, cyberbully and promote gossip and promote drama that may have no founding at all, that directly affects the reputations and thus the well-being of these students.
And for me, my personal viewpoint is kind of like what Mateo said, that bullying has evolved. It's not what we see in movies. It's not even what our parents or adults believe that bullying is. I believe that a lot of bullying happens within friend groups. They're your friends that you're supposed to trust, that you're supposed to be around every day, and then they start picking on you as a joke, but it's not a joke anymore, and then that's what causes the mental health problems. And now these students can't speak out because they're their friends. It puts these students in a really bad position, and these are the bullying problems that aren't really addressed. We have anti-bullying problems in schools, but that doesn't address the issues within friend groups when it's seen as socially acceptable when it's not. So that's a big issue into the bullying that then causes these students to have bigger mental health problems and hate their peers, and that could cause these mental health issues that we see today.
So Kaitlyn, what can we do about that? What can you do as a student in speaking to other students? What can parents do that are concerned and want to help? What can government do? What can any of us do on this issue of bullying that we're seeing?
First, realize that it's a problem. I feel like a lot of people just look over it as if it's not a big deal, and it is. So not only realizing that it's a problem, but then actually addressing it. And that can be done in a few ways. First, by increasing access to mental health facilities, not making it so expensive, making sure that everyone has equal access to these facilities, and that parents realize that their kids should be able to go to these facilities, and it's not just a simple phase or something of that sort that we see right now. So those are the simple steps that parents could do, and then on the government side, giving more access to these facilities, making it cheaper, making sure that everybody has programs in schools and equal access to counselors, making teachers counselors, so that way if a student is closer to their teacher rather than a counselor, they can have the teacher has the same training as any counselor would, and that makes the students feel more safe.
Mateo?
I'll say that the commissioner noted something that caught my interest, that a majority of, or a large fraction of individuals who may be incarcerated in our detention centers are in fact victims more so to mental health than anything. Similarly, I am of the opinion that zero tolerance policies can be quite damaging. You know, these are students who are still maturing. And Kaitlyn was absolutely right when she said that we need to look at this as a real issue that does not have a simple solution. So I think as soon as we can come together, and especially in the legislature of our government, begin to have a real conversation about solutions and about the issues affecting our kids, and perhaps taking better steps, whether it be counseling, whether it be access to mental health opportunities, or just cutting down zero tolerance policies, we need to start taking solutions here and start taking steps to solutions that will benefit our peers.
Commissioner, what are your thoughts?
I think that those are great points, and you're right. Part of what these kids are facing in high school, we didn't face these kind of problems in our time. And I think the internet and social media has brought a lot of this on. I really do. Cyberbullying, and I think that's oftentimes where it starts. You know, and then the peer pressure when you're in the small groups and one starts talking about another because you think you make yourself look better by bringing someone down. Kids are participating in that. But our teachers, we don't have enough counselors in our school, clearly. We don't have enough counselors. What I would advocate, and I think there are warning signs that we always find after the fact, that you see that the journals that the person wrote, or the Facebook postings, or the Instagram or Twitter accounts, what have you. You see these type of I guess, traits coming through or hints that something could be awry. So what I would like to see is exactly what you're doing here, is more of an open dialogue. And I'd like to really get your opinion, if you think that would help, that to have a more open dialogue in the school, in the classroom, to say, look, what's going on? You know, what can we do? Can we talk about this? You know, this is what's happening, and maybe raise some people's awareness. Do you think that would have any effect?
Absolutely, absolutely. It seems to be taboo almost in classrooms to talk about bullying. It seems to be taboo to talk either to your parents or to your guidance counselor. As it stands, the status quo, it's seen as against the norm to ask for help. That's not okay. And there needs to be a fundamental change in the way that we think about mental health or just general bullying. There needs to be a change in the system and in ourselves to begin to look to help other people.
And it's interesting you say that. You shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, if you have a broken leg, you're not afraid to ask for help, to go to a doctor and say, I have help with my leg, I broke a leg. Mental health is a health issue, and we need to have everyone know that there is help available, that you're not alone. And unfortunately, I think that's what leads to what you had talked also with the suicide rate. You know, sometimes kids, especially at this age, as you're maturing, feel that you're all alone, and you have no one to turn to, and you can't turn to your friends, you can't turn to your parents, and you're just lost and overwhelmed.
I want to explore something with you about social media and about our changing economic conditions in this country and how it may be impacting some of these issues. So, for example, it's not easy today to make progress, to make a living, to buy a home, to excel. It's becoming more and more difficult than it was for our parents. Home ownership, for example, is a more distant goal for you than it was for me, for example. In a situation where it's more difficult to have a successful and meaningful life, when you pair that with a situation in which our country glorifies notoriety, all forms of notoriety on social media, this advent of this new social media phenomenon, the true impact of which I don't believe we've yet fully understood or felt. But people are famous on social media. Influencers become famous, not for doing something profound, not for inventing something, not for discovering something, but even infamy is valued in today's society. In a society where it becomes increasingly difficult to have a meaningful life, and where notoriety is prized, does that contribute to some of these people who maybe want to be famous? For example, Anderson Cooper on CNN won't mention the name of a shooter because the fear is that some of these people are acting out to become notorious, to have their life mean something, feeling that their life otherwise wouldn't mean anything. Or there's a phenomenon called suicide by cop, with increasing suicide rates. People who are trying to commit suicide don't want to commit suicide themselves, so they do something dastardly, they become famous, and then they have the cops take them out. Do you think that any of this is playing into what we're seeing?
I read an article recently by Catherine Newman in which she outlined a research project that she completed. She identified that the people who commit these sorts of crimes are not loners. They're not people who are isolated. They're not people who are quiet beyond all reproach. They're people who try to make friends, who try to get into social cliques, and fail constantly. These are people who want to be recognized, who want, like I said, recognition, but they don't achieve it. So what's the solution? If the world seems to hate you, if no one seems to care about you one iota, then the best solution that you can have is try to take as many people out with you and then kill yourself or, like you said, get killed by the cops. Because what better notoriety can you achieve than being stuck on a 7-day news cycle on CNN or Fox?
Do you think there are warning signals ahead of time that we could catch, that a teacher, a counselor, or a parent should be able to catch on to and get the hint that, hey, look, maybe something's gone wrong here, maybe we need to seek more? Or do you think just is hidden from all their...
So I believe that there are warning signs, but the warning signs are different from person to person. But I believe if someone's asking for help or on social media kind of crying out for help, that shouldn't be looked over. That is a warning sign that right now it's being mulled over, and that's not what should be happening. But obviously warning signs are different from person to person and from activity to activity or whatever the case may be. So noticing the obvious warning signs, I think, is the first step, because right now we're not even doing that. Noticing, like with the Parkland shooter, what his posts were on his social media accounts. That's an obvious sign that obviously went to the FBI, but it was looked over. There was obvious signs for if they're crying out on social media or trying to actively get from friend group to friend group, as you stated. They're trying to do that. That's an obvious warning sign that they need help or they need friends. And that's the first step that we need to see as a warning sign. And as for everything else, those are smaller signs that we'll be able to pick up over time.
Interestingly, with the recent shooting, I read something that there were very little explicit warning signs, like you noted. So at worst, on his Facebook account, he maybe had a T-shirt that was of questionable nature. He had a hammer and sickle star and a Nazi Iron Cross. They're questionable, certainly, but in all cases, there's not going to be a red flag that we can identify. And that's specifically because we're working with juveniles, we're working with humans that are infinitely complex. So Kaitlyn noted that the FBI received, certain tips and warnings of the shooting. That's not a failure of the law. That's a failure of enforcement. And that's a failure at the federal level. And even at the state level, there are issues to be had. So we also have to look at how we enforce our laws, not just what laws we pass.
What can we do better that we're not doing at the state level, at the federal level? What can we do better? I mean, guns is part of the problem, I think we'll all agree, but it's not the entire problem. What can we do better as elected officials?
I think pursuing conversation with youth and trying to rebuild a connection between the citizens and the state is necessary. Because what's the fundamental unit of the American life? The family. And then on top of that, you have the community, whether religious or not, sometimes it's a church. And then on top of that, you have the city, the county, you have the state. There are many levels of organization that we have in our society. But there's immense political apathy, I'll tell you. No one cares, or at least the majority of my peers don't care about politics. And certainly, I'm not saying they have to, but to not care about the laws and the politics of your country shows that there's been a failure both on part of the government and on part of our own family and communal structures. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to begin to rebuild a connection between the government and the people so that there's trust in the mechanisms that we try to use to protect our youth.
My answer to that is, you say rebuilding the trust, and a way to do that is by able to reach across the aisle more often. Right now, a lot of elected officials are too partisan in their decisions, too funded by money to make their decisions that they don't reach across the aisle at all. And that's the way to start building trust, because now you're actually representing what your constituents want, which is why they voted you into office in the first place. So I think that's step one. And a lot of people don't have political apathy, as you stated, because they don't feel like their vote matters, because they feel like even if they put someone into office, it doesn't matter what they like. It doesn't matter what they want. They're going to do whatever whoever's funneling money into that elected official's pocket at the time. That's how they're going to vote. So that's what's creating that political apathy. So by able to reach across the aisle more often, that's a start to the solution. And whether that be on guns or on mental health, whatever the situation be able to be, having this open dialogue not only with youth but with peers, elected officials, peers of the other party, I think that's a enormous first step that we all need to take.
Are your friends and your peer groups frustrated, as I am, with the lack of progress on guns, on mental health, on those issues that we seem to be talking about these issues over and over again, and not a lot seems to be getting accomplished? And mental health is not getting funded. It's not being taken as a real health problem. It's just like, okay, suck it up, toughen up a little bit, and that's not the case. I mean, PTSD is real. Mental health issues are real, and are they frustrated that there's not been progress?
I think that's causing some of the political apathy, to be honest. I feel like because there's no progress, again, they don't feel like their vote matters. I feel like there's nothing they could do. It could go on the news a million times and nothing will happen. So I feel like that's a huge problem, the fact that that's causing the political apathy right now.
There's a real problem in our society when you say, there was another shooting, and your friend responds, oh, great, another one. That's an issue. And I take great offense to that, and I'm certain that my peers also are frustrated with this. So the fact that nothing's being done, it has to change, and there has to be a relationship between the people of the state and of the country and the government, because we shouldn't just abdicate all responsibility to the state. It's irresponsible to say it's the lawmaker's job. It's also our job. It's also our generation's job to work together across generations, across aisles, and across levels of our government to work together to come to a solution.
And I appreciate what you said, and I'm frustrated with, as you're frustrated with that, I'm frustrated with the elected officials. Every time there's a shooting, our thoughts and prayers go out. We're beyond thoughts and prayers at this time. I didn't worry when I sent my kids to school that they'd come home. Now parents they worry that your kids are going to come home when you send them to school. And I feel, frankly, that we've let you down as a generation, that we haven't done. We haven't taken it as serious as we should have, and we need to do a lot more. But my hope is the generation like you two, that, you know, that got great ideas and you're thinking through this, and together we can maybe hold hands and make some progress here, because as our generation, we just haven't done enough. We haven't made progress. We've let you down, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems to be getting worse. And I think there's a lot of contributing factors, but we need to address them one by one. And this shouldn't be political. This shouldn't be based on gender or race or political affiliation. This is a human crisis that we're dealing with right now, and we owe you better.
I mean, I know Kaitlyn's a little more left-leaning, I'm a bit more right-leaning, but we both want a solution to this. And it's a problem when we have elected officials that are controlled by special interests or controlled solely by their party. It is an issue when people put party and flag above their constituents. So I think we need to start working with that.
So it's interesting what we're hearing here, because there was a Gallup poll that came out where they indicated that people who identified as Republican or Democrat had been around 45 or 46% respectively. In your generation, that has dropped down to 25 or 26% respectively. Less of your generation identify as either Republican or Democrat. You are more bridge builders. You are capable of reaching across the aisle because you are less partisan than our generation, and that's a wonderful thing, something that I'm thrilled to be hearing from you. So maybe part of the solution, instead of us telling that millennials and young people that we know more than they do, you know, maybe we should be listening to them more. And one solution might be, you know, were you to become governor, to put a task force together on school shootings and involve people like Kaitlyn and Mateo in that task force.
I think that would be an incredible idea, because I think you've got so much to offer. I mean, your ideas are refreshing. I mean, they're very well thought out, and I commend you both for that. But you're raising issues that, you know, unfortunately, a lot of folks in the office now or my age are afraid to raise and afraid to address because they're uncomfortable. But you're not uncomfortable talking about them. You're not uncomfortable talking about the bullying. And that's not just guns, it's more than guns. And it's a bigger issue than that. And I think to have that dialogue is a positive the whole way. And you both seem flexible. And I think that's what George is saying. When you get into the Democrat, Republican, most of them are so cemented into a thought process. And you got to do this if you're a Republican. You got to do this if you're a Democrat. Well, if you're representing the people, the first thing you got to do is listen. And I know my father told me before he passed that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. But we don't do that a lot of times as elected officials. We do lots of talking, not enough listening to people that have ideas like you two do.
You know, there are a lot of issues that we could cover, and if we had more time, I would love to go into them. School design, you know, how we should be building our schools in the future. Fatherless homes, 43% of U.S. households are fatherless, 17.5 million fatherless kids in this country. You know, a lot of these different issues are potentially having an impact on what we're seeing. Not all school shootings are mass shootings. There are shootings every day where 1 or 2 people are getting shot. Right. And a large percentage of these shooters are coming from fatherless homes.
I'm really impressed with your knowledge of the issues and your willingness to talk, and it gives me hope for when I see this amount of talent and energy and thoughtfulness coming up, because it's definitely going to be impactful. And again, I feel that we've let a generation down and we haven't addressed this as well as we should have, but hopefully you'll do better moving forward and fix some of the mess that we as adults have made along the way.
I want to thank all of my guests, Mateo, Kaitlyn, and Commissioner Sisolak, for joining me. This has been a wonderful opportunity to hear from tomorrow's leaders and today's leaders about an issue that affects all of our lives, about a life and death issue that affects our children, our friends, and our family members. And enough is enough. How many people need to die? It's beyond comprehension that we're allowing this to continue in our country. We need to come together. We need to bridge this gap. We need to talk to one another. We need to realize that none of us have all the answers, and that the answers exist on both sides of the aisle. And both sides of the aisle need to be talking to one another. So thank you for joining us.